In a remote village, a formidable woman named Mama Grace held sway over her family and the surrounding community. Known for her cold demeanor and mysterious ways, Mama Grace was feared by many, for rumors whispered that she was a powerful witch. For years, she had maintained her grip on dark magic, but age was catching up to her, and she knew it was time to pass on her craft. Mama Grace had her heart set on a specific lineage, one that would strengthen her power even further. She wished for her only son, Daniel, to marry a woman from the notorious Kejoni clan, a family deeply rooted in witchcraft. The Kejoni clan was known far and wide, not just for their wealth, but for their mastery of the dark arts. Mama Grace had already chosen a bride for Daniel, Nima, the eldest daughter of the Kejoni clan. Nima was not only beautiful but also skilled in the ways of her family's dark magic. Mama Grace believed that by uniting her family with the Kejonis, she could secure her legacy and ensure that her witchcraft lived on through Nima. But fate had other plans. Daniel, unaware of his mother's sinister ambitions, had been leading a simple life as a cloth seller at the bustling market in the nearby town. Each day, he would set up his store, offering vibrant fabrics to the townsfolk. It was during one of these ordinary days that he met Aisha, a gentle and kind-hearted woman who captured his heart instantly. Aisha was unlike anyone Daniel had ever met. Her smile was warm, her laughter infectious, and her presence a light in his life. Over time, Daniel and Aisha's bond grew stronger, blossoming into a love that Daniel had never known before. Aisha's purity and innocence were a stark contrast to the darkness that loomed over his home, but Daniel was determined to be with her, despite not knowing the depth of his mother's plans. One early morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the small windows of their home, Daniel awoke with a sense of purpose. He had made up his mind he would introduce Aisha to his mother and tell her of his intentions to marry her. After finishing his morning chores, Daniel approached Mama Grace, who was sitting by the fire, her sharp eyes glinting in the dim light. "Mother," Daniel began hesitantly, "today, we will have a visitor." Mama Grace looked up, her eyes narrowing as she sensed something unusual. "A visitor? Who is this visitor, Daniel?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Daniel, his heart pounding, replied with a smile, "Don't worry, Mother. You will see her when she arrives." Mama Grace's mind raced. She had a sinking feeling that this visitor was the woman her son had been secretly seeing, but she couldn't be sure. Nevertheless, the thought of Daniel choosing someone other than Nima from the Kejoni clan made her blood boil. She had to know who this woman was, and more importantly, she had to stop her son from making a mistake that could ruin her plans. As the day wore on, Mama Grace prepared herself for the arrival of this mysterious visitor. She instructed her servants to make the house presentable, though she couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her chest. Her thoughts kept returning to the Kejoni clan and the powerful union she had envisioned. How could Daniel choose someone else? And who was this woman that had captured his heart? Meanwhile, Daniel eagerly awaited Aisha's arrival, unaware of the storm brewing within his mother. He believed that once his mother met Aisha, she would see the goodness in her and give them her blessing. But Daniel's hopes were built on a foundation of ignorance. He did not know the true nature of the woman who had raised him. The moment finally arrived. A knock echoed through the house, and Daniel rushed to the door, his heart full of excitement. Mama Grace watched from the shadows, her eyes narrowing as Daniel opened the door. Aisha stepped inside, her presence gentle and calm. As she entered the room, Mama Grace's breath caught in her throat. She could sense the purity in Aisha, a stark contrast to the darkness she desired to preserve in her family. Daniel turned to his mother, a smile spreading across his face as he said, "Mother, this is the visitor I spoke of." Mama Grace's face remained expressionless as she locked eyes with Aisha. The room was filled with a heavy silence, the tension palpable. After a moment, Mama Grace's lips curled into a forced smile, but behind her eyes, a plan was already forming. She would not let this woman take her son away from the destiny she had planned. After the initial tense silence, Mama Grace quickly composed herself. She could see the determination in Daniel's eyes, the unwavering love he had for Aisha. Realizing she couldn't confront the situation head-on, she decided to change her approach. With a sudden shift in demeanor, she forced a warm smile and moved towards Aisha. "Welcome, my dear," Mama Grace said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Please, make yourself at home." Aisha, sensing nothing amiss, smiled back and thanked her. Mama Grace gestured for Aisha to sit, her hands steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "I'll get us some tea," Mama Grace offered, turning toward the kitchen. As she left the room, she heard Daniel and Aisha whispering to each other, their voices filled with affection. As soon as Mama Grace disappeared into the kitchen, Daniel leaned in close to Aisha, unable to resist the love he felt for her. "I'm so glad you're here," he whispered before gently kissing her lips. Aisha blushed, her heart fluttering at the tender moment they shared. But what they didn't know was that Mama Grace had stopped just inside the kitchen, the door slightly ajar. She had moved to the window, which she quickly closed, before stealthily peeking out from behind the curtain. Her eyes narrowed as she saw her son and Aisha locked in a kiss. The sight filled her with a rage that threatened to consume her. Her hand trembled as she clenched her fist, her knuckles turning white. "How dare he," she muttered under her breath, "choose this girl over my plans." Mama Grace took a deep breath, forcing the anger back down. She needed to stay in control. Plastering a smile on her face, she carried the tray with tea back into the living room, her demeanor once again warm and welcoming. "Here we go," Mama Grace said cheerfully as she placed the cups in front of Daniel and Aisha. "I hope you like the tea. It's an old family recipe." Aisha thanked her, taking a cup and sipping carefully. Daniel did the same, and soon they were engaged in light conversation, speaking of their hopes and dreams. Mama Grace pretended to listen, nodding and smiling at the right moments, but her mind was elsewhere, plotting how she could rid herself of this unwelcome disruption to her carefully laid plans. Time passed, and after lunch, Aisha stood up, preparing to leave. She thanked Mama Grace for her hospitality, unaware of the true thoughts lurking behind the older woman's polite exterior. Daniel walked with Aisha to the door, but before she left, he turned to his mother. "Mother," Daniel said, his voice steady, "I want you to know that Aisha is the woman I've chosen to be my wife." Mama Grace's heart skipped a beat. She forced a look of surprise onto her face, masking the shock that coursed through her. "Oh, really?" she said with a forced laugh. "Well, my dear, you're most welcome. You are part of the family now." Aisha, touched by what she thought was genuine acceptance, smiled warmly and stepped forward to give Mama Grace a hug. Mama Grace stiffened for a moment but quickly recovered, returning the embrace with feigned affection. "Thank you, Mama Grace," Aisha said softly, pulling back from the hug. She waved goodbye as Daniel escorted her out of the house, Mama Grace following them to the doorway, her fake smile never faltering. She watched as they walked away, her hand raised in a final goodbye. Once they were out of sight, Mama Grace's smile vanished, replaced by a scowl of pure hatred. She slammed the door shut and stormed back into the house, her anger boiling over. She paced the living room, muttering to herself, her eyes wild with fury. "How dare he choose a wife without my permission?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "That girl will regret ever stepping foot in this house. I will not let some outsider ruin everything I've worked for. Just wait, she'll see what happens when she crosses me." After a tender goodbye, Daniel watched as Aisha boarded the bus that would take her back to her village. He waved as the bus pulled away, feeling a warmth in his heart, but also a lingering unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but he pushed the thought aside, convincing himself that his mother's acceptance of Aisha would grow in time. As Daniel made his way back home, the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village. The walk gave him time to reflect on the day's events, and by the time he reached the house, he was determined to stand firm in his decision to marry Aisha. Little did he know, a storm awaited him behind the door. As soon as Daniel stepped inside, he was met with an ominous silence. The house felt different, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to break. He called out for his mother, but there was no response. Unease settled in his gut as he walked into the living room, where he found Mama Grace pacing furiously, her face twisted in anger. She didn't even look at him when he entered. Instead, she began shouting, her voice laced with a venom he had rarely heard before. "You cannot marry that woman, Daniel," she screamed, her words slicing through the air like a knife. "I have a plan for you. You are to marry from the Kejoni clan, as it was meant to be." Daniel stood in shock for a moment, trying to process the sudden outburst. He had never seen his mother so unhinged. She was practically jumping up and down on the couch, her hands clenched into fists, her eyes wild with rage. "Mother, please, calm down," Daniel said, his voice firm but calm as he tried to soothe her. "I cannot marry into that clan. The Kejonis, they practice dark magic. I want nothing to do with them, and I will not bring that darkness into my life." Mama Grace stopped her frantic pacing and turned to face Daniel, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "You don't want to," she hissed, her voice low and menacing. "You think you have a choice? You will marry into the Kejoni clan, and I assure you, it will happen whether you want it or not." Daniel felt his own anger rising, but he fought to keep it in check. "No, Mother," he said, his voice now resolute. "I will not marry someone you've chosen for me. I've already made my choice, and it's Aisha. She is the woman I love, and I will marry her, no matter what you say." Mama Grace's face contorted in fury. She stepped closer to Daniel, her voice dripping with contempt. "You fool," she spat. "Do you think you can defy me? Do you think you can escape your destiny? You will marry Nima from the Kejoni clan, and there's nothing you can do about it." Daniel's patience snapped. He had tried to be understanding, to reason with his mother, but now he saw that she was not only angry, she was obsessed. "This conversation is over," he said coldly, his voice echoing through the room. "I will not marry Nima or anyone from the Kejoni clan. You can shout and scream all you want, but it won't change my mind." Mama Grace stared at him, her chest heaving with fury, but Daniel didn't wait for her response. He turned and left the room, leaving her standing there, shaking with rage. As Daniel walked away, the house was filled with a tense, heavy silence.